Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. December 10th, 1944, Lanzerath, Belgium. Imagine your boots sink slightly into the crust of frozen snow. The wind bites at your face, and before you stretches a ridgeline dusted in white. Serene, quiet, too quiet. Yet this calm conceals the storm to come. First Lieutenant Lyle Book, barely 20 years old, stands at that very spot, eyes fixed on the horizon that divides Belgium from Germany. Behind those silent trees lies the might of Nazi Germany, and it's preparing to strike. Book wasn't just young. He was one of the youngest commissioned officers in the entire U.S. Army. And now, with only 18 men at his command, he was being asked to hold the line against a force they couldn't yet see but knew was coming. Their task? To become the thin thread between the Allies and Hitler's final desperate offensive. What none of them could yet know was that, in just 6 days, their stand would hold back an entire SS Panzer Division, halting it for almost 24 critical hours. Hours that would tilt the scale of one of World War II's bloodiest battles, the Battle of the Bulge. But to understand the mettle of Lyle Book, we must step back further. He came from struggle. Close your eyes and picture St. Louis during the Great Depression. Cramped one-room houses, no running water, no electricity. That's where Book grew up, moving from place to place, survival etched into every childhood memory. At just 14 years old, driven by hunger and duty to his family, he walked into a National Guard office and joined up with the Missouri 138th Infantry Regiment. No one asked his age. For a single dollar on drill days, Lyle became a soldier. By 16, he was already a supply sergeant, earning more than most adults and sending his pay home to help feed his 4 younger siblings. What forged Lyle Book wasn't battle. It was hardship. That same unbreakable spirit, tempered in poverty, would one day be tested not in the streets of Missouri, but on a frozen Belgian ridge. When war loomed, he was ready. As the world spiraled toward conflict, the 35th Infantry Division was called to federal duty on December 23, 1940. Book joined the massive Louisiana maneuvers of 1941, proving himself as an exceptional transportation sergeant. His skill did not go unnoticed. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he leapt at the chance to lead, volunteering for officer candidate school. At Fort Benning, Georgia, he endured 4 grueling months that transformed him from an enlisted man into a military tactician. He graduated 4th in a class of 57 on August 25, 1942, a remarkable feat that earned him a coveted instructor's position, where he taught defensive tactics to future officers. Yet fate had more in store. After a year of teaching, he was transferred to the 99th Infantry Division and prepared to sail for war-torn Europe. Soon, the theories he had taught would be put to the ultimate test. November 1944, France. The 99th Infantry Division landed in Le Havre, as green as the uniforms they wore, untouched by combat, dropped into what many believed was a quiet corner of the front. The Allied push had been relentless since D-Day. Paris was liberated in August, Brussels followed, and Antwerp came shortly after. Momentum was on the side of the Allies. The Ardennes, a dense, rugged stretch of forest in eastern Belgium, was thought to be a place for rest, a place to blood-fresh divisions before heavier fighting. By mid-November, the 99th relieved the seasoned 60th Regiment of the 9th Infantry Division. The sector was still, too still. Book now commanded the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon of the 394th Infantry Regiment, a hand-picked group of elite soldiers, many of whom had been university students in the Army's Specialized Training Program before being redirected to infantry duty. The platoon, ideally 25 men strong, was split into 2 9-man recon squads and a 7-man HQ unit. Their job was as dangerous as it was vital to venture into enemy territory, map enemy positions, capture prisoners, and report back. They were not line infantry. They were ghosts, scouts in uniform, trained to gather information and vanish. For weeks, they danced on a razor's edge. Through snow-laden woods and fog-wreathed valleys, Book's men crept forward, slipping past German lines as far as Losheim, 2 miles deep into enemy territory. They returned with prisoners, charts, and first-hand intel. Their nerves were steel and their instincts razor-sharp. For their daring, several, including Book, received the Combat Infantryman Badge, awarded only for valor under direct enemy fire. Still, despite the danger, losses were minimal. The Germans across the Siegfried Line seemed content to stay put. Reports painted them as spent, exhausted from endless war on multiple fronts. Perhaps, some dared to believe, the worst was over. But then came December 10th, a call from Major Robert Kriz, summoned Book to regimental HQ, new orders, immediate deployment. The platoon was to move southeast to the village of Lanzerath, a speck on the map with 23 houses and a single church. But its significance couldn't be overstated. Lanzerath sat astride a key road in the northern Losheim Gap, a 5-mile chasm in the American line between the 99th Infantry to the north and the 106th to the south. That gap, if breached, could become a highway for German tanks straight into the vulnerable American rear. Activity on the enemy side had increased. Something was coming. The platoon's mission to hold the gap, to act as tripwire, to sound the alarm before the storm broke. Book examined his maps. He did the math. 25 men on paper, 18 available, 18 scouts, not combat troops, were being asked to hold ground that a full regiment might struggle to defend. A 5-mile stretch of darkness and uncertainty. And so, the die was cast. December 10th, 1944, Lanzerath, a village on the edge of the storm. Imagine being told that you're the last line of defense, that behind you, nothing but open road for the enemy to charge straight into the heart of your army's rear, that the closest backup is miles away, stationed at Buchholz Station, the 3rd Battalion of the 394th Regiment. Now imagine you're just one of 18 men. That was the reality Lieutenant Lyle Book faced as he stood on the ridge above Lanzerath. Should the Germans come in force, they would face the enemy alone. No reinforcements, no support. Just 18A against whatever storm might come rolling out of the east. And the tactical situation? It was a spider's web of complications. Book's platoon had been nominally folded into what was now called Task Force X, a patchwork unit drawn from the 820th Tank Destroyer Battalion, 55 men, and 4-towed 3-inch anti-tank guns. Alongside them, 22 soldiers from the 2nd Reconnaissance Platoon of the same battalion arrived, clattering into the village aboard a half-track and 2 jeeps. On paper, it looked formidable. But paper lies. None of the units had trained together. There was no shared command, no unified plan, just names on rosters and strangers in uniform. Yet war doesn't wait for organization. They dug in. The platoon reached Lanzerath on December 10th. Book quickly chose his ground, a wooded ridge northwest of the village, sloping gently down into a broad, snowy field. A tactician's dream, clear fields of fire, elevation, natural cover. His men got to work, carving foxholes along the tree line, placing them for maximum crossfire. Camouflage netting and overhead protection disguised their positions and shielded them from shell bursts. The fresh snowfall helped too, cloaking their defenses in white silence. Weapons were meticulously placed. 2 .30-caliber machine guns swept the approaches, and in a stroke of foresight, Book had personally requisitioned a Jeep-mounted 50-caliber heavy machine gun, a brute of a weapon, capable of tearing through vehicles and men alike. Hidden in defilade, it watched the southern flank, ready to punish anything that moved. Every gun was zeroed on a distant farm fence that sliced across the open field 100 yards away. That line became their kill zone. At night, they laid tripwires tied to cans filled with stones, primitive alarms to catch any silent intruder creeping through the woods. A telephone line ran to Battalion HQ at Losheimer Graben. The radio linked them to regimental command back in Huningen. Patrols slipped into Lanzerath to coordinate with the tank destroyers and recon troops. Every step was measured. Every movement had purpose. Then came the waiting. The frost deepened. So did the tension. The temperature dropped like a hammer. Winds lashed the ridge. Snow fell 4 or 5 inches thick, masking everything in white silence. The men curled in foxholes, numb and alert, watching. Most were barely out of their teens. America had sent them from classrooms and farms to a place they couldn't have named before the war, to hold a ridge no one had expected to be critical. For 5 days, they stared into the trees. German activity crept upward. Trucks rumbled through the night. Lantern lights flickered beyond the trees. Something was building, growing just beyond the edge of visibility. Other units sent in reports. German movements, reinforcements arriving, new patrol patterns. But the generals thought they understood. Intelligence believed the Wehrmacht was a dying beast, broken, exhausted, incapable of a major strike. Surely this was just preparation for defense against Allied thrusts to the north, but the truth was far more dangerous. December 16th, 1944, 5:30 a.m., hell opened its jaws. With a roar that tore the sky, 1,600 German guns unleashed a storm across an 80-mile front. Shells screamed overhead, smashing into American lines. Operation Wacht am Rhein, Hitler's final throw of the dice, had begun. The plan was audacious. Punch through the Ardennes, take Antwerp, split the Allied armies in half, and force a truce in the west. With that breathing room, the Nazis could turn all remaining might against the Soviets. 3 German armies surged forward. Elite SS Panzer divisions, newly equipped, would lead the charge. And the spot Hitler believed weakest, the sector held by Green American troops, was exactly where Lyle Book's 18 men now lay waiting. For 90 minutes, the barrage thundered. Tree limbs snapped like gunshots. Shells clawed at the earth. Shockwaves hammered through the frozen ground. And yet, the ridge held. The foxholes, so carefully dug and concealed, were missed. The Germans were firing blind. At 7:00 a.m., the barrage stopped. Snow drifted quietly again. The men of the platoon blinked into the sudden stillness. Somehow, miraculously, all were alive. The phone line was dead, but the radio crackled on. Then came worse news. Abandoned, alone, exposed. Through the soft mist of dawn, the platoon watched as Task Force X, their tank destroyers and armored recon support, simply pulled out. No orders, no word. Just gone. Book's men were now the only Americans between the German front and the rear lines of the 99th Division. Then movement. Shapes emerged from the east, at first scattered, then clustering, then marching. Book grabbed his binoculars. Hundreds of German soldiers, far more than any intel had warned. His stomach dropped. He called it in. He asked to fall back, delay the enemy, save his men. The reply was swift and cold. Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way. Hold at all costs. Book made one last move. Around 8 a.m., he and 3 men, Sergeant William Slape, Private James Silvola, and Technician Sam Jenkins, pushed into the village to scout. They took up an observation post in a house abandoned by the retreating Americans. And there, through the frosted glass and pale light, they saw it. A column of 500 German soldiers moving with chilling precision from Losheim toward Lanzerath. Not ragged conscripts. These were Fallschirmjäger, elite German paratroopers, veterans, disciplined, deadly. This was no probing attack. It was the tip of a spear meant to drive straight through the American line. Book raced back to the ridge. 18 Americans against 500. That's 28-1. Every instinct screamed, pull back, scatter, fight another day. But orders were orders. Hold at all costs. And then a betrayal, a warning, a desperate plea. In Lanzerath, an elderly Belgian woman approached a cluster of German officers outside a cafe. She gestured up toward the ridge. Perhaps she feared for her village. Perhaps she meant to protect lives or end the fighting quickly. We may never know. What's certain is the message reached the German commander. Immediately, the Fallschirmjäger began to fan out, preparing for assault. At 10 a.m., they came, emerging from the village, advancing across the snow toward the silent trees, toward the waiting foxholes, toward 18 men who would now write themselves into history. They came in perfect formation and walked into the jaws of a trap. Picture it. Lines of German soldiers spread wide across a glittering white field, advancing with clinical precision. Rifles ready, steps steady. The winter sun danced on the fresh snow, casting a brilliant glow over the landscape, almost beautiful, almost peaceful. But it was a deadly illusion. They moved with confidence, expecting little resistance, perhaps a scattered patrol, maybe a few scared green troops. What they didn't see were the silent foxholes hidden in the trees above them. What they didn't know was that the very earth they marched upon had been measured, mapped, and zeroed in with merciless detail days before. From his camouflaged position, Lieutenant Book watched. His men lay motionless, hearts pounding in unison with the rhythm of incoming boots. The Germans passed the fence, the invisible line of death. 100 yards, 90, 80, 75. Then Book gave the order. In an instant, the quiet ridge became a thunderstorm of fire. The twin 30 caliber machine guns opened up, spitting lead in wide interlocking arcs. The snowfield below transformed into a deadly maze of crisscrossing bullets. Then came the sharp rhythmic cracks of M1 Garands, each shot deliberate, each bullet finding its mark. These weren't just riflemen. They were hand-picked marksmen, trained for precision. Each pull of the trigger meant another paratrooper falling. The fence, which just moments earlier had been a harmless pasture boundary, became a line of slaughter. Some Germans tried to huddle behind it, only to find that wood offered no protection against American steel. And then a new sound cut through the chaos, deep, rhythmic, devastating. The .50 caliber machine gun roared to life. Its thunderous bursts tore through the battlefield, the sheer force of each round echoing like sheets of metal being ripped apart. It was like watching a scythe swing through the air, only this one cut down men instead of wheat. Within minutes, the assault shattered. The remaining Germans broke and ran, dragging wounded comrades, leaving behind dozens of bodies. The snow, once pristine, was now marred with blood. Not a single American had been hit. But the fight was far from over. The stunned German commander pulled back and reassessed. Surely, he thought, this couldn't be just one platoon. The volume and discipline of fire suggested an entire company, maybe more, with heavy weapons. He ordered a second assault, this time supported by artillery and mortars. Shells began to rain down on the ridge, pounding the treetops, throwing shrapnel and snow into the air. The second wave moved out from Lanzerath, advancing cautiously, using terrain, returning fire, creeping forward with textbook discipline. Again, the Americans let them come, and again, they unleashed hell. Machine guns swept the field, rifles snapped out death. The .50 caliber gun still intact, found fresh targets, columns of men trying to regroup, soldiers dashing for cover, officers barking orders. The result was the same. German bodies littered the slope, blood soaked into snow. The Americans held firm, but it came at a cost. This time, the enemy didn't retreat quietly. Suppressing fire from machine guns within Lanzerath peppered the tree line. Mortars continued to fall. The Germans were learning, adjusting, probing. The Americans' carefully concealed positions were slowly becoming visible under fire. Ammunition ran low. The ridgeline shuddered with each detonation. Wounds began to mount. A few men took fragments, nothing mortal, yet the attrition had begun. Book knew it was only a matter of time before they were flanked, surrounded, overwhelmed. He radioed back. Again he asked for permission to withdraw. The reply, "Hold your position. Reinforcements are coming." They hadn't come yet. At 2:00 p.m., the third wave hit. This time, it wasn't just another push. It was a hammer blow. More troops, more fire, more fury. The German commander was throwing everything he had left. The Americans responded with the only thing they had, firepower and grit. But even iron wears thin. Private Billy Queen, one of 4 artillery observers attached to the platoon, was struck by a bullet in the stomach. His scream cut through the gunfire. His comrades rushed to him, but there was nothing they could do. No medic, no tools, just pain, prayer, and silence. Within minutes, he was gone. The first and only American to fall that day. Then came disaster. Sergeant William Slape, manning the .50 caliber machine gun, raked the German lines. Again and again he fired until the barrel glowed like a branding iron. The gun bucked, spat fire, then began firing on its own, overheating out of control. Slape wrestled it down, but it was too late. The barrel warped, the weapon jammed. The platoon's most powerful asset silenced when they needed it most. Still, the Americans held. They fought with rifles, grit, and raw fury, and once again, the third assault broke and retreated, leaving a shattered field behind. 92 confirmed German casualties, hundreds more shaken. The snowy slope before the ridge had become a graveyard, and still, the German commander believed he was facing a full American company. He didn't know the truth, that it was only 18 men. 18 men against the full weight of a battalion, and they were still not done. Dusk fell. The trap was closing, the sky darkened, the cold deepened, and so did the peril. The ridge that had held all day now began to tremble, After nearly 10 hours of continuous combat, the Americans were spent. Ammunition was running dry. Every man bore wounds, some minor, others critical. The .50 caliber gun was destroyed. Communications had gone silent. Still, they held. But war, like nature, always finds the cracks. The Germans, bloodied and beaten back time and again, finally changed tactics. No more frontal assaults. Now they probed, testing the edges, searching for a weakness. And as the shadows stretched across the snow, they found them. The flanks collapsed. Paratroopers, moving in groups of 50, slipped around the sides. They encircled the ridge, creeping through the trees, guided by blood, smoke, and vengeance. One by one, foxholes became islands. And one by one they fell. The fighting turned savage. Close, personal, steel met skin. Men wrestled in frozen earth, bayonets flashing in the half-light. In one foxhole, a German soldier fired, striking Book in the leg. The man beside him collapsed, gravely wounded. Book, unable to move, was captured at gunpoint. Within minutes, it was over. 15 men were taken prisoner. 2 others, Privates Jenkins and Preston, had been dispatched earlier that day to seek reinforcements. They would be captured the following morning. Only 3, Robinson, McGehee, and Silvola, managed to slip through the dark woods toward Losheimer Graben and American lines. The Battle of Lanzerath Ridge had ended, but its legacy had just begun. 18 men from an intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, aided by 4 artillery observers, had held off an entire battalion, over 500 elite German paratroopers, for almost a full day. They had inflicted 92 confirmed casualties, suffering only 1 killed in action and 14 wounded. But beyond the numbers, they achieved something greater, something that would echo through the rest of the war. They delayed the German war machine. As the captured Americans were brought into Lanzerath, German medics, many of them just teenagers themselves, treated their wounds in makeshift aid stations set up in village homes. Outside, the bodies of German soldiers still lay scattered in the snow. The 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, battered and demoralized, did not press forward. Their commander, unnerved by the resistance, feared more American forces lurked beyond the tree line. Tanks, perhaps. Reinforcements. So they stopped. They waited. And the entire German timetable began to unravel. It wasn't until midnight, nearly 12 hours behind schedule, that the main column of German armor finally rolled into Lanzerath. This was Kampfgruppe Peiper, the tip of Hitler's spear. Commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper, this elite battle group was the most powerful formation in the Ardennes Offensive. 4,800 men, 800 vehicles, and 117 tanks, including the dreaded Tiger and King Tiger heavy tanks. His orders were simple: reach the Meuse River on the first day, seize the bridges, and open the gates for the rest of the 6th Panzer Army. Speed was everything, but what Peiper found was a frozen village, a bloody field, and no road forward. Furious, Peiper stormed into the command post and confronted Oberst Helmut von Hoffmann, the commander of the Fallschirmjäger Regiment. American prisoners watched the clash unfold. Peiper, though technically outranked, wielded the real authority. He demanded answers. Why hadn't the road been cleared? Why hadn't scouts moved into the forest? Why were they sitting here behind schedule? Hoffman tried to explain. His men were exhausted. They had taken heavy losses. They thought a larger American force was ahead. Peiper didn't buy it. He led a reconnaissance force forward himself and found nothing. The forest was empty. The American force that had halted the regiment's advance for an entire day had consisted of just 18 men. By the time Piper resumed his advance, it was 4:30 a.m. on December 17th. He was already 18 hours behind schedule. That delay would prove fatal. The Ardennes Offensive was built on precision timing. Traffic jams began to build as other units stacked up behind Lanzerath. Roads clogged. Tempers flared. The blitzkrieg had stalled before it even began. But on the Allied side, something else was happening. The hours bought by Book and his men allowed the Americans to act. Commanders scrambled reinforcements. Divisions on the move were diverted. The 1st and 2nd Infantry Divisions, the 7th Armored, and eventually the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. They all rushed into position, sealing the breaches before they could widen. By the time Piper clawed his way free and began his dash toward the Meuse, the path was no longer open. Still, Piper struck with fury. He overran American positions at Honsfeld and Büllingen, capturing vital fuel depots. On December 17th, near the Bonnier crossroads, elements of his force would commit one of the most horrific crimes of the war, the Malmedy Massacre, executing 84 American POWs in cold blood. Piper drove on. He reached Stavelot, crossed the Amblève River on December 18th, pressing deeper into Allied lines. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed the breakthrough might succeed. But the tide was turning. The skies cleared. The weather that had grounded Allied planes on December 16th lifted. Fighter bombers soared. Roads were cratered. Bridges were blown. Tank destroyers waited in ambush. American resistance hardened. The 30th Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, 3rd Armored Division, all converged on Piper's corridor. By December 22nd, Kampfgruppe Piper was encircled at La Glaise, starving, freezing, and nearly out of fuel. From over 4,800 men and 117 tanks, only 800 survivors remained, and no tanks. On the night of December 23rd, Piper gave the order, abandon everything. Men scrambled into the woods, leaving behind over 100 vehicles, including 6 King Tigers. The spear point of the 6th Panzer Army had shattered. The dream of reaching Antwerp was over. It had all begun with a ridge, with 18 men, with a choice to stand. The frost-bitten march into captivity began in silence. The clock had reset. The ridge was lost. The guns had fallen silent, but for the surviving men of the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, a new ordeal was just beginning. The few who could walk were herded east, deeper into German-held territory. Those too gravely wounded to move were left behind in makeshift field hospitals, entrusted to enemy medics whose compassion was often all that stood between life and death. For 2 days, the captured Americans trudged through snow and ice, hunger gnawing at their bellies, exhaustion clouding their minds. Then came the boxcar. At the village of Junkerath, Lieutenant Lyle Book and 71 other American POWs were crammed into a single, filthy cattle car. There was no room to sit, no air to breathe, no food or water to ease the torment. Days passed. Christmas arrived, not with warmth or cheer, but with death. By the time the train stopped, 7 men were dead. The survivors, starving, freezing, barely alive, were eventually offloaded and taken to hospitals in Frankfurt and Hanover, where they received rudimentary treatment before being sent to POW camps. There, amid disease, malnutrition, and despair, they would remain for 5 more months, until the advancing Allies liberated them in April 1945. Book believed he had failed. To him, the 16th of December had ended in defeat. His unit overrun, his men wounded, captured, the position lost. In the chaos of the battle's early days, their stand went unnoticed. No one in higher command understood what had happened at Lanzerath. And so, when the war ended, most of the survivors simply went home. They were exhausted, broken in body and spirit. There were no medals, no headlines, just silence. But the truth would not remain buried. Years later, as historians combed through dusty German after-action reports, a revelation emerged. The 18-hour delay at Lanzerath had shattered the carefully engineered timetable of the 6th Panzer Army. It was more than a heroic stand. It was a strategic pivot point in the Battle of the Bulge, the failure to seize Elsenborn Ridge, where elements of the 99th and 2nd Infantry Divisions had anchored a stubborn defense, could be traced directly to that delay. The offensive's northern shoulder, which Hitler had planned to rupture in hours, became a wall the Germans could never breach. Had the Germans punched through on schedule, they might have reached the American supply hubs at Liège and Spa, possibly turning the tide of the war. But they didn't, because of 18 men on a ridge. And slowly, recognition began to stir. In June 1966, Lyle Book opened his mailbox and found, without warning, a silver star. No ceremony, no letter, just a medal. None of his men had received anything. The omission pierced him deeply. Shortly after, Book was interviewed by John S.D. Eisenhower, son of the general who was researching his book, The Bitter Woods. Eisenhower was moved by the story and later, as U.S. ambassador to Belgium, hosted Book and several platoon members when they returned to Lanzerath in December 1969. The village had been rebuilt. The people welcomed them with open arms. Gratitude still lived there, passed down like family stories. But some wounds still bled. One of them bore the name William James, born Sarconicus. He had endured 37 operations in a futile attempt to heal the wounds from that December day. On June 27, 1977, he died of complications. Columnist Jack Anderson, learning of James's story, launched a public campaign demanding the Medal of Honor be awarded posthumously. For the first time, the nation turned its gaze to the forgotten ridge. Congressional hearings followed. Investigators pored over reports. Lawmakers debated. Eventually, a rare move. Public Law 96-145, signed by President Jimmy Carter on December 14, 1979, waived the statutory time limit, but only for the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon of the 394th Infantry Regiment. The Army and Air Force supported the Medal of Honor nomination, but the Marine Corps, required to approve all such awards, rejected it, citing lack of sufficient intrepidity. Controversy erupted. It remains unresolved to this day. Still, the tide could not be stopped. The hearing spurred a full review of the platoon's actions. And at last, on October 26, 1981, 36 years after the battle, recognition arrived. 14 of the original 18 men gathered at Fort Myer, Virginia, for a solemn, long-overdue ceremony. Secretary of the Army John O. Marsh presided. The honors were staggering. 4 men, including Lieutenant Book, received the Distinguished Service Cross. 5 were awarded the Silver Star. 9 received the Bronze Star with V device for valor. The entire platoon was bestowed the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest honor a unit can receive. No American platoon of its size earned more decorations for a single action in the entire war. At the podium, Book's voice trembled. He didn't speak of heroism. He spoke of Billy Queen, who had died on the ridge, of William James, who died years later, of the quiet courage of the men beside him. They had believed for decades that they had failed. Now they knew they had helped change the course of history. the world did not forget. On May 12, 2005, the Belgian government unveiled a stone monument on Lanzerath Ridge. Unadorned, yet profound, the inscription reads, "On this ground, 18 American soldiers delayed 500 German paratroopers, halting an entire SS Panzer division and contributing to Allied victory in the Battle of the Bulge." It has become a place of pilgrimage. Every December 16th, a ceremony is held. Belgian school children grow up learning about the ridge above their village and the men who refused to yield. Lyle Book lived to see it all. He returned home, built a life, a family, and a career as a chiropractor, working from 1949 until his retirement in 1997. For decades, he rarely spoke of the war, but later in life, he began to open up to historians, to researchers, to his own family. He stayed in contact with the platoon. He spoke at funerals. He gave eulogies. He wrote letters. He lobbied Congress. He never stopped fighting, not for medals, but for memory, not for himself, for his men. December 2nd, 2016. The final chapter of a remarkable life quietly closed. At the age of 92, just days short of his 93rd birthday, First Lieutenant Lyle Book died of pneumonia. With his passing, the last officer of the Lanzerath platoon was gone. The news rippled across the nation. Military journals, veterans' newsletters, and newspapers paid tribute. Even the New York Times published a full obituary, a solemn recognition of the young lieutenant who once stood on a frozen Belgian ridge and held back history for nearly a day. Veterans of the 99th Infantry Division gathered to honor him. Memorial services were held, and when Book was laid to rest, it was with full military honors, flags folded, rifles fired, taps echoing into the winter air. In eulogies, those who knew him spoke not of a man chasing glory, but of one who had spent his life ensuring others were remembered. He had never sought attention, never claimed heroism for himself. Always it was about the men who had served under him, especially those who never came home. The Battle of Lanzerath Ridge was, and remains, one of the most extraordinary small unit actions in American military history. Just 18 soldiers, led by a 20-year-old lieutenant, held their ground against 500 German paratroopers. They fought for nearly 10 hours, inflicted 92 confirmed enemy casualties, and were only overcome when flanked in darkness. But their real impact lay not in the kill count. They stopped time. For 18 critical hours, they delayed the opening thrust of Hitler's last offensive in the West. Because of them, the German 6th Panzer Army, spearheaded by the elite Kampfgruppe Peiper, missed its timetable. Peiper was supposed to reach the Meuse River on December 16th. Instead, he found himself trapped behind a battered parachute regiment that had spent the entire day engaged with what it believed was a large American force, but was, in reality, just 18 men. When Peiper finally moved on December 17th, it was already too late. He never recovered the time. American commanders had seized the opportunity. Fuel depots were destroyed. Bridges were rigged and blown. Air support, grounded on the first day by weather, had time to launch. Reinforcements flooded the front. The 1st Infantry Division took blocking positions. The 2nd Infantry Division fortified Elsenborn Ridge. The 7th Armored reached St. Vith. The Ardennes and 101st Airborne dropped into Bastogne and Verbermont. All of it possible because of a few more hours bought on a ridge. Historians now agree. Had Peiper reached the Meuse on schedule, the Battle of the Bulge might have dragged on longer with far more Allied casualties. The Allies still would have won, but at a cost measured in thousands more lives. The story of the platoon endures because it speaks to something deeper, a pure embodiment of military virtue. 18 men, outnumbered 28-1, facing elite German paratroopers with artillery and mortar support. They could have fallen back. No one would have blamed them, but they didn't. They stood. They fought with discipline and precision. They held their fire until the perfect moment. They made every bullet count. They endured artillery barrages, freezing temperatures, and the death of comrades. They followed orders that seemed impossible, and they obeyed them without hesitation. Book's leadership was the thread that held them together. At just 20, commanding men older than himself, he proved himself under fire. He chose the ridge with tactical brilliance. He placed weapons with foresight. He enforced fire discipline. He moved between foxholes under fire, encouraging his men. Even when wounded and captured, his thoughts were with his soldiers, and his soldiers were no less extraordinary. They were expert marksmen, selected for their intelligence and physical skill. Every round fired that day was aimed. There was no panic, no waste. Even as they watched Billy Queen die, even as shrapnel tore through their lines, even as they realized no reinforcements were coming, they held. And these were not grizzled veterans. The 99th Infantry Division was green. Lanzerath was their first fight, yet they fought with the composure of seasoned professionals. The Germans they faced, the 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, were elite paratroopers, combat-hardened, well-equipped. They had every advantage except the will of 18 men in foxholes. That they failed to take the ridge for nearly a day speaks volumes. Eventually, the Germans adapted. They flanked, infiltrated, and finally overran the Americans. But by then, the damage had been done. The Fallschirmjäger Regiment was so mauled, it was rendered combat ineffective for the remainder of the offensive. The fog of war clouded everything. Cut off from communication, Book believed he had failed. He didn't know that his platoon had helped stall the German timetable, had shaped the entire battlefield. He carried that belief of failure for decades. On the German side, they too misunderstood. Their commander believed he was facing a full company with heavy weapons. That era, born of the ferocity of American fire, caused him to halt the advance. That hesitation bought even more time. Only after the war, through journals, interviews, and cross-referenced reports, did the full story emerge. And it revealed something else too: the difference between professionalism and brutality. The Fallschirmjäger, though fierce in battle, treated their prisoners according to the Geneva Conventions. They tended to the wounded in civilian homes, provided what medical care they could, and marched them respectfully to the rear. Contrast that with the horror that would follow the next day, the Malmedy Massacre, when Piper's SS troops murdered 84 American prisoners. The same army, a different face. For the survivors of Lanzerath, captivity was its own trial. They were crammed into rail cars like cattle, no food, no water. They watched men die beside them. They spent months in disease-ridden camps, many barely surviving. Several came home forever changed. Wounds lingered, illness lingered, nightmares lingered. But eventually, they learned the truth. They hadn't failed. They had made history. When liberation finally came in April 1945, it found them hollow-eyed, gaunt, and changed forever. They emerged from barbed wire camps and crumbling boxcars as shadows of the men they had once been. Skeletal, ill, traumatized, Their bodies carried the scars of captivity, untreated wounds, broken bones, frostbite. But worse were the scars no one could see, the long silence, the memories that returned each night, the voices that would never stop whispering. Some, like William James, born Zaccanicus, would spend the rest of their lives enduring surgery after surgery to repair the damage done in a single day of combat. He fought to live until June 22, 1977, when complications finally claimed him. Others bore the pain in quieter ways. They had paid the price, not just for holding the ridge, but for holding the line between tyranny and freedom. But the recognition of their sacrifice came slowly, too slowly. Their story, the stand of 18 soldiers that shifted the course of a war, was almost lost. Why? Because the system failed them. In the chaotic, fragmented fog of the Battle of the Bulge, units that were overrun, cut off, or captured often vanished from the official record. Valor was buried beneath paperwork. Heroism went unnoted. The decentralized chaos of combat swallowed facts whole. It took 36 years, a relentless campaign by Lieutenant Book, journalists like Jack Anderson, and even an act of Congress before the platoon received the honors they had earned on that December ridge. How many other stories were lost, but this one survived, and it echoed. Over time, the stand at Lanzerath Ridge captured the attention of historians, writers, filmmakers. The most comprehensive account came in Alex Kershaw's The Longest Winter, a powerful narrative that reached the shelves of the New York Times bestsellers list, carrying the story to a new generation. Military academies began teaching it. Tactical experts studied it. Officers in training now learned not just about D-Day and Bastogne, but about Lanzerath, too, because it wasn't just a battle. It was a blueprint. It showed what happens when a well-trained, well-led, and disciplined unit holds a prepared defensive position, uses terrain with surgical precision, and fires with intent, even when completely outnumbered. It validated modern doctrines, decentralized command, initiative at the junior officer level, independent action in absence of higher orders. These 18 men didn't need constant radio calls. They didn't need backup. They needed training, trust, and time. And with that, they did what few would have believed possible. They demonstrated the human side of war and of courage. These weren't icons carved in marble. They were boys from farms and cities, from immigrant families and university halls. Some were still teenagers. Lieutenant Book himself had joined the National Guard at 14, not to fight, but to help his family survive the Great Depression. When fate dropped them into a snow-covered Belgian ridge, they didn't fight because they believed they were heroes. They fought because the men beside them needed them to. That's what made them extraordinary. And when the war ended, their bond did not. The men of the platoon remained close. They attended reunions. They wrote letters. They held memorials when one of their own passed. Book, always the quiet center of it all, often delivered the eulogies. In the decades that followed, the people of Lanzerath never forgot either. They kept in touch. They opened their homes. They hosted visits. When the monument was finally dedicated in 2005, 3 generations of Belgians gathered. Some remembered the battle. Others had been told stories by parents and grandparents. To them, these Americans were not soldiers from a foreign land. They were liberators. The lessons of Lanzerath echo far beyond that frozen ridge. Victory in war is often defined by sweeping campaigns and famous names. But history is also shaped by moments of quiet, desperate courage. A squad at a bridge, a platoon at a crossroads, A handful of men in a line of trees. 18 soldiers at Lanzerath were not part of a grand offensive. They were a tripwire, a line in the snow. They were expected to observe, report, maybe delay for an hour or two. Instead, they rewrote the map. They inflicted 92 casualties, imposed an 18-hour delay on an armored spearhead, and caused the collapse of an entire day in the German timetable. That delay changed everything. The fuel depots were emptied, the bridges were blown, the skies cleared, and Allied aircraft returned. The reinforcements arrived just in time, not by luck, but because of time. Time bought by a ridge, time bought by 18 Americans. And when it was over and the war was won, they carried on. Most of them never called themselves heroes. They returned to quiet lives. Fathers, husbands, workers. They built families. They bore pain. They mourned comrades. They tried to forget and failed. They tried to remember and wept. But the memory of what they had done never faded. Every December 16th, on that same ridge, the people gather. Wreaths are laid, names are read, speeches are given in English and French. Belgian school children stand with American flags, learning what happened in the forest above their village. Veterans and soldiers come from across the world to honor them. And so the ritual continues. As long as we remember, they are not gone. Their courage echoes in every cadet learning fire discipline. Their resolve lives on in every platoon that trains to stand alone. Their leadership endures in every young officer, taught to act without orders when the radios go dead. They didn't fail on December 16, 1944. They succeeded beyond measure. They held their position as long as any human beings could have. They fought like giants. And when the battle was over, they had rewritten the course of a war. They proved that in war, size does not always decide the outcome. Skill matters. Training matters. Leadership matters. But above all, courage matters. Lyle Book and the men of the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon were ordinary Americans who, when the world asked the impossible of them, answered. That is the definition of heroism. That is the legacy of Lanzerath Ridge.